recording studios in Hostel City, USA. It's the Rock and Wrestling Connection Podcast.
Hey now, brother.
We're going to talk about rock. We're going to talk about wrestling. We're going to talk rock and wrestling.
We're on the air.
All right, episode 3 of the Rock and Wrestling Connection. We have today, you ready for this, fellas?
Oh my God.
I'm ready.
You ready who we have on the phone?
Here we go.
He's hailing from beyond Venus, beyond Jupiter, way past Uranus. He drinks multi-lube and jerks off the popular mechanics, the one, the only, Techno Destructo.
Unbelievable. Techno Destructo.
That's right. It's me, Techno Destructo, except no imitations. This is the real thing. And I'm here on Earth to bring intellectual enlightenment to the human race through the greatest thespian art form, professional wrestling.
It's
But
great to
there
hear.
is one thing that super pisses me off about wrestling, and that is that they're so, I don't know. We'll get to that later.
What's going on, Techno? What brings you to this part of the galaxy?
I've been having fun doing professional wrestling. Believe it or not, that's what I've been doing for the last years. And it's really been pretty intense. And one thing that really pisses me off about the wrestling industry is that there are so many wrestlers out there that have phony bullshit gimmicks. And that's what my goal is, to wipe out all of the bullshit from professional wrestling. Because you can look at me, and when you look at me, you can tell that I'm for real, that I mean it, and that I'm really here, that I'm the only wrestler that's really from outer space, and I'm ready with my cyborg claw to rip people's brains out and spit them into the audience. And if you don't believe it's real, you come and see it. And when it hits your face, when their hot blood is landing on your girlfriend's cleavage as she sits next to you and screams, you're going to know that it's for real.
That's great. I've actually been following your career. Are you still with FreakShow Wrestling right now?
I do a lot of shows with FreakShow Wrestling, but unfortunately, this fucking plague has slammed the brakes on my budding wrestling career. You know, so it really sucks because I had a lot of cool shit wound up in the about to happen, about to explode onto the scene. For instance, I've been working with Micromania, and soon there's going to be my next match before COVID happened was supposed to be, I was going to unleash my new midget sidekick. That's right, my new midget sidekick, the Destructomite. We were going to do a show at the Whiskey A Go-Go, and that show is still going to happen. It's just we don't really know exactly when yet, you know. So I'm pretty excited about that. But I've also been working with one of the people that I met through Ken Bodie's FreakShow Wrestling is Jennifer Thomas, who is an incredible female wrestler. Who she's also a really incredible bodybuilder, and she looks. It's just hard to describe how she looks. But I've been working with her a lot, and she works with this company called Session Girls. And so they do these crazy all-female athletic events that have like female wrestlers from the Ukraine, you know, trying to pin each other for real, Greco-Roman style. And oh my God, these chicks almost kill each other every time. One of the matches, there was a double countout. One of the events where they had a boxer chick come out, and she's fighting a man who had a fucking cage on his head to protect him, and he needed it too, man, once she lit into him. And there were a lot of crazy stuff going on at this show. There was this gauntlet thing where audience members were encouraged to come up, and after a donation, they get into the ring, and all of the performers in the show laid down, all the women that were in the show, lay down sort of in a circle in the ring with their feet towards the middle, right? And picture this in your head. So all the women are laying down in the ring with their feet towards the middle in a circle, and the victim or a volunteer, I guess, from the audience who's actually paying to do this gets into the ring, and one by one, these women put this guy in a like a leg lock around his neck, right? And squeeze him until he taps out, which usually takes about 2 seconds because these chicks like have these incredibly muscular, crazy thighs. And so they squeeze this guy's head until he like taps out. And then they just throw him to the next girl in line who does the same thing until he taps out. And then she passes him to the next one until he goes around the thing. And so what happened at the show was Techno Destructo was so outraged by seeing this spectacle that I had to burst forth and interrupt the show, upon which my old arch nemesis from FreakShow Wrestling, the infamous Shelly Martinez, comes out, and we sort of fought a little bit, but ultimately I had to like succumb when she put the camel toe clutch on me.
I might have to side with Shelly on that one. I'm a big fan of hers. I heard she likes to puff the ganja. She's a good girl.
I'm glad you're telling us the story because I for people who haven't seen Freak Show Wrestling, it really is a spectacle. It's some high level entertainment right there.
It's really crazy, and one of the amazing things about it is that Sin Bodhi, the guy that runs the show, you should definitely check him out. He's been doing these crazy promotion videos and stuff that are like nothing anybody has ever seen. They're like totally hallucinogenic and really bizarre, really weird. He really is the warlord of weird, And like a lot of the crazy stuff that I've been doing, a lot of the best matches I've had were against Sin Bodhi. Like we did an invisible cage match, which is online. You can check it out on the House of Huntar. Actually, I've sort of let it slip, but I'm like, this is really Hunter Jackson.
Hunter Jackson.
Yeah, I mean,
hey now,
I was sort of impersonating Techno Destructo. I don't think he would mind too much if
You had me fooled.
Anyway, we were talking about Freak Show Wrestling, and if you check out the House of Huntar, that was what triggered the transformation. Was I have this House of Huntar YouTube channel that has wrestling videos on it that if you haven't seen them, you should definitely check them out. And there's going to be a lot more. I just launched a revamp of my House of Huntar website, so you should really check that out too. And both of them have lots of wrestling content on them, lots of pictures and descriptions of crazy, weird Freak Show Wrestling matches I was in and stuff. There was one Freak Show match where Techno Destructo was the special guest referee, and this was the Martian invasion match, So and this was totally Sin Bodhi's idea, right? And so you have, like, on one side you have these Martians, right, that are all these guys with, like, gray alien masks on and painted purple, And then they're led by this guy, this little skinny guy that's dressed up like the Marvin the Martian from Bugs Bunny, And so they're up against Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, Flash Gordon, Luke Skywalker, and Princess Leia with a trash can painted like R2-D2, and stuff like that. And the whole thing was which side is Techno Destructo going to be on, And it was really crazy. And D'Lo Brown played Captain Kirk. And that's one of the coolest parts about Freak Show Wrestling and working with Sin Bodhi is he's friends with everybody. I mean, Jake the Snake Roberts is his mentor, and he was in WWE for a while. he just got canned over some political bullshit that, if I tried to explain it, it would,
we don't. But this isn't that type of show. We're not looking for that.
You don't need to go into that,
Yeah,
but he was a WWE guy. He was called Kazarni, and I think he had like a couple of matches or something, and then all of a sudden he got canned over some political bullshit that didn't even really have anything to do with him, He was just like part of the residual damage,
Yeah,
but he's super awesome. I've learned so much from him about how to work my character in the ring and stuff like that. And but he knows like every wrestler in the universe and is friends with them. So a lot of these guys in Freak Show Wrestling, they'll play extra weird characters. All of a sudden they'll be like I remember one time there was a match where it was Christmas time and it was Santa Claus against Jesus, right? And so Jesus turns out to be John Morrison. And
one half of the former WWE tag team champions.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely incredible. Freak Show Wrestling has had an incredible locker room of guys. So they, like you said, everyone kind of gets in on it. You've had current WWE superstars, former WWE Hall of Famers, and a great locker room yourself. Let's go through Brutus the Barber Beefcake. He was in there one time, correct?
That's right. He sure was.
What was it like working with the Barber?
Tons of guys. And I got to meet like Kevin Sullivan and and one of the matches that Sin Bodhi edited together that's plugged on the House of Huntar website, by the way, and it has a link to it, is a match that I did with Sin Bodhi that was an anti-gravity match, right? And Jake the Snake Roberts is the special guest referee. So to be able to work with those guys, and we did that. We shot the whole thing in the studio. There wasn't even an audience at all. So it's like we're having a wrestling match in limbo or something weird like that. And then we have this, like I have these prop machinery pieces and stuff that we would stack in the corner, and that's the anti-gravity machine, So, and then we used to do it live, and part of the fun of it is to try to get the audience to play along with, okay, now when the gravity goes this way, everybody lean to the right, like that. But it was a real challenge. He used to throw that one at me and me and Serial Man. I used to work with this guy, Derek Smith, who was already playing this character called Serial Man, which is a guy that he's sort of like a lot like Powdered Toast Man from Ren and Stimpy, but he has a cereal box on his head, right? And I helped him with my GWAR skills and stuff. I helped him revamp his mask and make it better, and taught him how to work with latex rubber and stuff like that. And we worked together for a while. He taught me a shit ton about wrestling and how to work in the ring and stuff. And we had a lot of really, and at the same time, I was also trying out the idea of bringing the gore effects, that GWAR-style gore effects, into the wrestling ring as well. But, we had to be careful because when you make a big mess, then especially with the mixture that we use to make the fake blood, it's like super slippery, And so if it gets all over the ring, it's really hard to clean up. So we were doing these matches called the Bloodbath for a Balanced Breakfast. And they were super fun and really gory, And I was really experimenting with how to work with the eating the brains and squirting the like I would use the blood bags. I didn't have a fire extinguisher that gushed, 15 feet into the audience like we did with GWAR. But I did have like blood bags, and I would use them a lot. And it was really fun. We had a lot of fun. But eventually I figured out the way to do it, where I would spring on the ropes and pop it into the audience. So most of it goes into the audience, which is the idea. Most of it goes up in the air and into the audience and not in the ring. Doesn't end up in the ring. That's the trick.
Well, Hunter, just for the people listening that don't know this, you're an original member of GWAR, and not only that, you used to make the costumes.
Yeah, GWAR started out actually because I was working on this science fiction movie called Scumdogs of the Universe, and which was a science fiction movie because I hated Star Wars. And I was like, Star Wars sucked so bad, I wanted to show people what a real science fiction movie full of awesome sex and violence would be like. And one of the things I hated the most about Star Wars, even though it won Academy Awards and shit for it, was the fucking soundtrack. It had like this shitty disco soundtrack, that really just, made my blood boil. I mean, when I saw Star Wars, when I came out of the theater, when I saw the first, I was like white knuckle mad, man. I was so pissed because I felt like everything that was good in Star Wars was a ripoff of Jack Kirby's New God story, and there was all this mamby-pamby bullshit, and I was like, man, I want to see Road Warrior in outer space with a fucking punk rock soundtrack. That's what I wanted to do. And that's how I hooked up with Dave Brocky, who was doing this crazy weird band called Death Piggy, which was like a weird punk rock show where he would do stuff like he would wear, like it's really hot in Richmond, Virginia in the summertime, and he would wear everybody walks around with cutoffs. Like that's where my name Huntar sort of comes from. It's because everybody walks around with cutoffs all the time, and I never wore shoes or a shirt. So people started calling me Huntar the Barbarian. And I had this long blonde hair back when I was like a teenager and shit, 800 million years ago, in the very earliest days of fucking punk rock. I was like probably the first person in Richmond to have a mohawk. But anyway, so he was in this band called Death Piggy, where he would do crazy, weird theatrical shit. Like he would pour a whole jar of, in the beginning of the show, he would pour a whole jar of mayonnaise down his cut-off shorts, and then during the show, he would slap his thigh right on the inside, and the mayonnaise would squirt out. And it was a crazy, weird show. He would also do stuff like he had this. He would make these papier-mâché dummies, and he'd wheel it out. And this was Uncle Nobby, who he was pissed because his mom made him have to watch his quadriplegic uncle, tonight when he wanted to do the show. So he decided to bring his quadriplegic uncle to the show, and then he just abuses him the whole time. It's pretty funny. But so Dave was already doing stuff like that, and occasionally I actually, would also help him do special effects. Like I remember one show that Death Piggy was doing where Wendy O. Williams this was right when Wendy O. Williams had split from the Plasmatics and was doing her solo career, right? And she was doing these awesome shows where she was wearing these like horse harness bikinis, and then she would take the top off on top of that. So she would come out with a leather jacket and those horse harness bikini, and she had just been in Playboy, and she was talking about she was pissed because Playboy airbrushed her ribs out, when they showed her naked and stuff. So anyway, Death Piggy was warming up, got to do was a warm-up band for Wendy O. Williams. So she had just been in Playboy, so we were like, oh man, let's do like Dave, like looking at the picture of her in Playboy and jerking off on stage, So I made this penis thing that was made out of like part of a vacuum cleaner, ribbed vacuum cleaner hose. So it had this jerk-off action, but it was most of it was just a ketchup bottle from like a diner, one of those diner plastic ketchup bottles and then I made a little bit, I took the top of it that screws off and made that into a dick head and put some veins on it with some hot glue, and then painted the whole thing pink, so we had and then we filled it up with some kind of green, like oatmeal or something. But as soon as Dave started jerking off, with it, the audience knew what was going to happen, and they like parted like the Red Sea. So when the jizz came out, it just went on the floor, and nobody got it on them, which was kind of a bummer. But the whole thing went really well. But that was like the first penis, like first squirting penis thing, you know. So that was sort of where that led into GWAR. The other thing that led into GWAR was I was working on my Scumdogs of the Universe movie, and I was making all kinds of props and costumes for my movie. And so Dave comes up with the idea, man, let's do a band. And I had already asked him, like, I really like the Dead Piggy music. I'd like to use it as, you know, my cool punk rock soundtrack to my awesome movie. So I'd already talked to him about that. We had collaborated on different things. So he was like, let's do a warm-up band for Death Piggy, because that was the other thing he used to do with Death Piggy. When they would play little shitty shows, they would be their own warm-up band and just make up some stupid band and write 3 shitty songs, you know. And like one of them was the Nazi Jews, I remember, and stuff like that. Just stupid, silly ideas, you know, that were just, you know, not really meant to be anything important or anything like that. So I would bring all the costumes to the show in a big garbage bag, and the band would just take the costumes and just put them on and you know, get up on stage and do like a couple of songs, you know, and like that. So that's how GWAR first started, you know. And
so GWAR was the opening band for Death Piggy.
Yeah, like an opening band for Death Piggy.
Amazing.
And then, so a lot of times, then later on as it evolved, there was a band that we used to play with a lot called the Alternatives, who they were sort of a weird jazz punk rock fusion that's hard to describe. And I'll tell you, a lot of the bands that I was never into GWAR for the music, so I have to apologize. I mean, I love David Bowie and Iggy Pop and stuff like that, but you know, a lot of times, a lot of the bands we played with, that, you know, I just didn't get them, you know, and it just seems like a lot of horrible, hard to listen to noise. But
about what year are we talking right now? What year was that?
Let's see, that would have been probably 85 and 86, I would think. Probably 85 when we first started like playing with the idea of doing GWAR. And then, because I think I opened the Slave Pit in 1984.
So you're a young guy in Richmond, Virginia. It's a wrestling podcast. Let's talk a little wrestling. What was your first time you ever saw pro wrestling?
So when I was a kid, when I'm talking like 4th grade or so. What are you, like 10 or so then? So Saturday afternoon, there was only 3 channels plus public TV, you know, which doesn't count because they almost always suck. And so there were only 3 channels to watch, and one of them is usually golf, the other one's usually bowling, and so then you have wrestling, you know, which I wasn't necessarily into, but it's a lot better than bowling and golf, you know. So I would be watching wrestling while I'm, you know, working on my, you know, drawing my stupid pictures or whatever arty stupid stuff I was doing at the time. And I started to watch wrestling, and I started to like get interested in it, and I was like outraged. And I'm talking about Ric Flair and way even before that with the Briscoe brothers, you know. And they're like, their thing was always, oh, they're so good, they don't have to cheat, but why do they always do it anyway? You know, and so they would be about to win, but that wasn't enough. They had to like really punish the guys and fuck them up. And as a little kid, I was like, why do they let this go on, you know, and stuff like that. So then later on, it sort of starts to evolve. And one day I asked my dad, I started to get into, the 2 that really got me into it were the Masked Avenger and the Super Destroyer, right? The Super Destroyer was a big guy that had a gold mask with an eagle on it. And then the Masked Avenger was a good guy who was much smaller, and more acrobatic and had a blue lucha mask on. You know, so to me, this was like superheroes, and I was super into Jack Kirby comic books and stuff at the time and all that. And so these characters were like superheroes to me. So that really got me into it. That drew me into it. So we went to see that. I asked my dad, and much to my surprise, he goes, yeah, let's go see it, you know. And I was like, really? You know, so we did, man. And that, I really had a great time with my father because I grew up with 3 sisters, you know. And so that was a chance for me and him to go off and get away from the, you know, perfume and stuff and go out and have a good time. And plus it was like back then it was like really seedy. So the whole place was dark. It was in it wasn't in a Coliseum. They hadn't built a Coliseum in Richmond yet. It was in a big arena, but it was like full of smoke. There were all kinds of shady, weird characters. And me as a little kid, I'd never even seen people like this, you know. And that was part of what my father was saying. You know, you'll see people here from all walks of life, you know. So we were there. The audience was mostly black, you know, and so I was rubbing elbows with a lot of different kinds of people, you know, that I hadn't had close contact with, and it was amazing to me. But the show itself, what ended up happening was, also on the ticket was Ivan Koloff and Jimmy Valiant, Boogie Woogie Jimmy Valiant, right? So Jimmy Valiant was this big fat old man. He had a big beard like Santa Claus and a big huge pot belly, and he used to carry a gigantic boombox on his shoulder, and that was playing the Manhattan Transfer song about the boy from New York City, you know the one?
Of course.
The Oogie Boogie Man.
So,
is he from Richmond?
I don't know. I think most of those guys or a lot of them are from North Carolina, not Richmond.
I thought he was a Virginia guy.
He may be. I don't know, and I'm definitely not going to argue, you know, wrestling authority with anybody.
No way.
But anyway, what happened in this match was Ivan Koloff, and at this time he was playing the devil, more like this devil character. But instead of having a pitchfork, he had a shovel, you know? So he wore this like red plastic Dracula cape that had the big cowl, this big curved cowl that came out like Dracula. And then his suit was all red, you know, so he was like the devil. And then he used to carry the shovel around that he would occasionally hit people with and stuff like that. So, but what happens this particular time is he comes busting into the, you know, Boogie Woogie comes out first, right? He's shaking his Santa Claus beard around, bobbing his head, and they're playing the music over the loudspeaker, you know, and he gets into the ring and he has this, like, he had a valet that had these, like, huge, like, football-sized boobs that would come out with him, you know.
Big Mama.
And,
Big Mama, right?
Huh?
Her name was Big Mama.
Yeah, that's right, Big Mama. And she had black hair. She had this curly black hair, big curly black hair, like a huge hair. So anyway, he comes out, and they're all doing their parade around the ring thing, you know. And me and my dad were right on the aisle where the wrestlers come in, because when he got the tickets, he actually worked downtown near where the Coliseum or the place was. And he got the tickets, and he got them right on the aisle where the wrestlers entered. So we got to see everybody's entrance, like, right there. And so Ivan Koloff comes busting out of the dressing room, and he just slides right into the ring, and he grabs that boombox off of Boogie Woogie's shoulder and just smashes it over his head, and it shatters into 1,000,000 shiny, glowing pieces. It was unbelievable. And me as a little kid, my jaw just hit the floor. I was like, whoa. I was so sick of that shitty song, you know? And it was so awesome. And after that, I mean, the bell hadn't even rung. After that, he's lying like starfish in the middle of the floor. You know, he doesn't even move after that. You know, he was like, it knocked him totally out cold. And then the bell rings. It was so funny, man. It was the best I think even to this day, it is the best wrestling match I've ever seen in my life. It was so awesome. But then later on, years later, after they did build a huge Coliseum building, and wrestling started to come to Richmond, Virginia, well, it had all along, but anyway, it started to do the big arena shows. And the cool part about it was only about 10 blocks from where the dairy building was, where the slave pit was. Because the slave pit was in this huge warehouse building that it had been a dairy building, so it had like these huge milk bottles on two, I think 3 corners of the building, but it might have just been 2. But it had these huge towers, these cylindrical milk bottles, and inside in the architecture it was actually cylindrical. And this building had been like 4 different buildings, but as the company had bought them all, they had sort of combined these buildings into one building. So it was a weird maze of a building, and it had lots of strange rooms that were like ceramic inside, that had been like special refrigerated rooms where they would keep ice cream, and they had lots of machines. They had rooms. The room that I had was special because it had a hole in the middle of the floor that with a railing around it and a really steep stair that led down. And the reason I like this room is because I wanted to make this into my spaceship set, and then you could have characters on the upper floor leaning over this railing and yelling at people in the engine room,
So this was like a shared art space, this building?
It was what?
Was the building like a shared art space where your studio was?
They were renovating it, and the company that owned it, the people that were in the process of renovating it, sort of started renting the space out to artists and stuff on the sly to make extra money to fund the renovation of the building. So a lot of this stuff we were always in, and then of course we all start moving in and shit like that. So there were a lot of people that lived there illegally, and it was a really precarious situation because you could be evicted at any time, and we were constantly getting warnings like, oh my God, it's coming down this time, it's for real, we gotta leave in 2 months, and the time would go by and, oh, it's gonna be okay, rent's gonna increase, but we're gonna get to stay, and shit like that. That was always going on. It was a really precarious situation. But then later on, GWAR got a more permanent building. The slave pit moved to another part of town, but then here we are years later. Now we're in the era of Fuck the Police, which I got to admit that album was one of the most played albums when we would be working in the slave pit. We had that NWA album with Fuck the Police on it. We used to play it and listen to it constantly, and it was that time. So we used to hear Richmond, Virginia was always in the top murder per capita, thing. And we used to always laugh about it because, oh, my God, little podunk Richmond, Virginia. But the reason for it is that Richmond, when you think about it, Richmond is right on 95, which is the highway that runs all the way from Florida up into Maine, so plus Richmond or Virginia itself has the slackest gun laws of pretty much any state on the East Coast. So criminals from Florida all the way to New York City and, everywhere in between go to Richmond to buy their guns, and on top of that, during that time period, there was a notorious group called the Jamaican Gun Posse, who were actually guys from Jamaica who had moved to Richmond, and they did this thing where they rented a van, then they crashed it through the wall of the local gun shop and just cleaned the place out. Or when I say local gun shop, I should actually say biggest gun shop in Richmond, Virginia, capital of Virginia.
Sounds like the local gun shop for the East Coast.
Right. So they fucking cleaned them out. So after that, man, Richmond was fucked up, and it wasn't unusual to hear different guns firing each other at night, you know, like pow, 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 you know, like that, where you can hear that these are different caliber guns and different firing rates, you know, and you can hear them. One morning, I came into my office, and there was this little crumpled up piece of metal on the middle of the floor, and I was like, what the fuck? And I pick it up, and it was a bullet, and I look at my window, and there was a little teeny circular hole in my window of my office where this bullet had ricocheted from God knows where, you know, and had just enough energy to penetrate that window and fall on the floor, you know. It was a weird time. It was a weird time. And the local punk rock club had glass, the club that we played in a lot, had glass windows, like big plate glass windows, and you could see into the bar what's going on and everything. And it was right across the street from the local black disco. And man, black dudes used to come to that bar, come over to the punk rock bar and point at people and say, hey, you white boy, when you come out, I'm going to, you know, fuck you up. You know, it was a weird time. It was a very weird time.
Do you remember what the punk club was called?
I was walking down the street past, it was the day that school let out, right? It was in the summer, and school had just let out for summer. So all the kids are crazy, acting crazy and stuff. And I walked by I was on my way to the slave pit, and I had just gotten a super big gulp from 7-Eleven, right? So I'm walking along, sipping my Dr. Pepper, and all of a sudden, these black kids are all around me, and this one guy jumps on like springboards off of the bumper of a car, like a diving board, and he hits me in the back of the head with something like, I don't know what. And I like went down, and but I didn't spill my drink. That was what I was, when this was going on, that was what I was most worried about, was I was spilling my drink. And I like fell down, and I stood up, and I was like, what the fuck? And I looked around, and I was surrounded by little kids that was, not all of them were a foot shorter than me. And I was like, looked at them like, what the fuck? Are you guys fucking with me? You know? And I just turned around and started walking, you know? And then they did it again. Came running and jumped off the next car and hit me in the back of the head and knocked me down again a second time. And I was like, again, I did not spill a drop of my super big gulp. That was what was most important to me. And look, there was a strip club down the block, and all of a sudden these guys come running out of the strip club with 2x4s and chase the kids off, you know? And it was crazy. And they also had this other weird maneuver they were doing where the littlest ones would come forward, you know, so that even if I was to hit one of them, it would be the, like, you know, 3-foot tall one. You know, that was bizarre too. So the whole time I was just shaking my head going, what are you guys, what's going on? You know, you can't possibly, you know, be attacking me, you know? And I was more worried about my super big gulp. But that's what it was like then, man. It was a weird, very weird time. And now I've moved away. Like, I haven't lived there in 15 years. And what's going on there now with all the riots and stuff and them tearing down the Confederate monuments and all that stuff, man, wow. It's like, man, it's crazy.
Well, they're going to put a GWAR statue up instead now, so I think that's a pretty cool idea.
GWAR got contacted by, I don't know, some legit civil rights group who courteously asked them to cut it out because they're undermining their message. And I think they're going to do it.
So,
but, you know,
is there any truth to the rumor that you might get back together and do something with GWAR?
Well, I know that GWAR is planning a big event, since they're just like my wrestling